Hello everybody and welcome to my channel. I am Moody and I'm a 3D artist with a ton of experience, but I'm sure there's a handful of you that already know that. In today's video we are going to be sculpting Metal Sonic. So just before the video starts, I want to go over a couple of things I'm going to do a little bit differently in this one. One of them being that I'm going to model one side of this sculpt and then mirror it over and reorganize it in the scene layers so that I'm able to pose it later. Another thing I'm going to be doing quite a lot of in this is using the voxel remesh tool as a type of boolean, and we'll go over that in a little bit more detail when I get to it. We're also going to use the radial tool a couple of times, which is another tool I don't use very often, and again I'll cover that with a little bit more detail. And the rest of it's going to be very much cutting out shapes, using the trim tool and the mask extract tool. So with all that being said, let's get into it and start sculpting Metal Sonic. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is start putting some of these shapes in, and we're going to use the voxel remesh tool to carve out some of these shapes like I said before. We're going to trim it up a little bit. Again, we're only going for the sort of like main shapes of this. We'll do a bit more tidying up in a little while. I'm going to add a radial tool here in a second, so I'm going to make the shape for some of the stuff in the middle of this sort of engine area, and I'm going to, in the layers, scene layers tool, once I've made the shape, I'm going to add, with this selected, add a radial to it, and then just move the shape into position and do any tweaks that I want from there. The good thing about this radial tool is that once you've got it in there, anything you do to one mesh will be done to all of the others. Again, this one's using the mirror function on this bit, so I'm going to, there we go, I'm going to add some sort of detail to the inside of this sort of engine area, and that's just using the mirror function up the top there, on the top right or left, depending on how you've got it set up. So here we're just going to pull out the shapes of his head, and using the trim tool we're going to try and cut out so that it kind of matches the reference as good as possible. We're then going to mirror that and scale it down a little bit, and using the boolean function, or the voxel remesh as a boolean, we're going to cut out the shape of the inside of his head. Making sure that we leave some at the front, because again we've got to add eyes and stuff to that. So this mesh here is just to fill up the back of the head a little bit. And again, I think a lot of what we're going to be seeing here is it's going to be the same stuff, using the radial tool to make some of the shapes around the engine, using the remesh tool to cut out some of the shapes. And yeah, like I said, we're going to be working on one half of the model, so I think I'll let this play out for a little while and just jump in if anything interesting happens. So yeah, the radial tool here, again, once you've done some work on one of the meshes, it repeats across the whole thing, which is a great thing for doing stuff like this. So yeah, let's let this play out for a little while and I'll jump back in if anything interesting happens. Okay, so I'm just plotting out some points like the elbows and the knees there, and I'm going to start working on the groups that are going to be in for the arms. So we're just going to try and make this look like it works, like I want it to look like a robot would move. I want it to look like it's working how a robot should work. So I'm going to try and put all the pieces in so that they're in position and they're all in the right place with the right pivot points, and then we're going to be able to pose it after that. So again, I'll let this play out because it's just a lot of the same, using the trim tool and the remesh tool to cut out the shapes. And like I said, I'm just going to be working up one arm, and then I'll move down to the leg and try and build that all the way down. So unless I use any different tools or anything, any other techniques, I'll just let this play out for now. So yeah, just doing a bit of organisation there. When it comes to the joins like the hips and the ankle or the elbow, I'm trying to make it so, particularly in the hips and the shoulder, I'm trying to give it two positions on two separate meshes to move from. So the closest to the body on the shoulder, for example, being the rotation, and the cylinder underneath the shoulder pad there being the downwards rotation for the arm. So I wanted everything to feel like it has at least 2 points to rotate from, because I didn't just want to chuck in like a ball joint. It just feels lazy. So I feel like this feels a bit more mechanical, so I went with this, you know, just adding a few little details in there to give it like a believable, like there should be a piston here, for example, on the elbow, so that there's something there kind of pulling it back up and bending it back up and down. So like I said, I just want all of this to feel as mechanical as possible and like it pivots from the correct places. So a lot of this detail is going to be added here using the mirror function on the top there. If you go up there, there's a radial section. There we go. I think I just went into it a little there. So there's a radial section in there where you can add a certain number of points to sculpt from. So you know, you can have like 30 points around a cylinder, all doing the same sculpt that your pen is doing. It's a great little tool. So I'm working on his right side because the reference I have here doesn't actually show the left side of his body, as you can see here. So I'm going to work on his right side, then mirror it over, and then just delete what's on the right a little bit later when I no longer need it. There's going to be quite a few moments in this where I join everything and then have to separate it out and reorganize it in the scene layers again. But it's just hindsight's 20/20, right? Like I didn't realize at that point that I wasn't done with it, so I just grouped it, you know. So here, for example, using the join function, that means it doesn't mesh it all together, and then you can sort of still work on it and duplicate it across and anywhere you need it. But that also, like I said, it does mean you have to go back into the layers and reorganize everything so that you compose it later on. Still better than sculpting two sides of the model though, so you know, I just went with it. So here we are cutting out the visor. We're going to cut the shape out of it, make sure that it looks good from the front, and then we're going to mask extract so that we've got a mesh to use as a cutting tool into the head, so we can, you know, we can boolean it out using the remesh. So here we go, I'll mask it off, extract it out so that it's like a deeper visor, and I'm going to just literally use this to cut out the shape. There you go. I do end up, because it's not a perfectly clean cut, I clean it up a little, here we go, and I split it in half and mirror it back over so that I can work with symmetry again. But you know, it's still kind of quick and it's still a decent result, so I'm happy with that. So adding the eyes here, I do go into this soon, I think, actually, and just kind of test it to make sure that the eyes can be seen through what's going to end up being the visor. There was a couple of things I had to do. I might write it in the description if I can't remember what it is exactly, the material that I had to put on it. But I set the eyes up so that they've got like they're always unlit, which makes them glow, and then you can sort of crank up the bloom in the render settings there, and it makes them glow. So here we go. It's a proof of concept right now to make sure that I can actually see the eyes through the visor, and we do get there eventually. I'll try and write it in the description because I can't actually see what it is right now because I've got the microphone in the way. Yeah, I'm pretty pleased with that. They look alright. So yeah, I think at this point we start working on the snout and the nose, like his muzzle and the nose, and then once we've done with that, I think we move on to, I think I accidentally mirror it over again and reorganize it before realizing that I need to work on one side of it for a second time. But then I also do go ahead and start modeling his cannon, because I was at this point still unsure of what pose I was going to do him in, but you know, it doesn't change the actual model because, like I said, I can pose it at the end. Everything's a prefabricated machined part which doesn't change when he moves like a human body would. So, you know, I was less worried about the pose at this point and just more concerned about getting the model finished so that I can actually pose it how I wanted it. I'm just doing a bit of tidying up. I think the whole scene just became a little bit heavy, so I went round a bunch of parts on the body that were just a little bit too high resolution for what they were and what you could see of them, and just remeshed them a little so that they were a little bit more manageable, and the scene's just a bit more manageable this way. So So it did reduce the scene by a significant amount. I got it down by about 1 million points or vertex points or whatever you want to call them in this. But I did bring it down significantly enough to make the scene just a little bit more manageable. This is where I mirror it across again and realise that I've still got to paint one side of it. And we'll fix all that up later. But I'm still going to be painting one side of it right now. I think at this point I just wanted to see how it looked and make sure everything looked okay. But I do... Here you can see me organising everything still, and I don't really think I needed to do this just yet. Hindsight's 20/20, like I said though. So here's where I start working on his cannon. I didn't actually finish it because I did decide at a certain point I just wasn't going to do that pose. I kind of settled on something else. But yeah, I started modelling the cannon anyway, and I thought I'd leave it in just, you know, as an extra thing so that you guys can see how I might, you know, go about at least starting something like this. But yeah, I never actually finished this cannon because I just decided not to use it. So we'll let it play out, and I'll probably jump back in when I start doing the painting now. Okay, so here we go with the painting. So one of the things I'm going to do here is, as a base layer, I'm going to put a either a chrome or like silver or a steel base, and then I'm going to add a layer of paint on top of that and make that like as metallic and reflective as I can, just because I think it looks cool. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back over the entire thing, and I'm going to start like just rubbing off some of the edges so it looks like he's got a bit of edge wear. Like, I don't want him to feel like a brand new robot. I want him to feel like he's been fighting Sonic before. So yeah, we're going to go back over this once I've laid the base coat and the top coat down. We're going to just scrape away some of the edging to make it like feel like edge wear. I think this is where I start doing it. So another thing I'm going to do once I've done the edge wear is I'm going to pick like a matte type of color with a very slight sort of reflectance to it, just very, very slight, and I'm going to add that in as dirt around anywhere that I feel there needs to be dirt. And I'm also going to add it in amongst all of the joints so that it feels like there's a grease track running on any of the parts that are machined and moving in that way. So you'll see when I get to it, but for now I'm just going to go through sorting out all the edge wear, tidying it up a little bit so it just doesn't feel like scrapes, but it actually, some of it feels like chips. I also try and get it running across the model because this guy's going to be moving fast. So anything that does hit him is going to roll off of him and sort of leave chips and dents, but it's going to feel like they're rushing over him rather than just being scratches from bumping into stuff or anything like that. So yeah, I wanted the whole thing to feel like it was flowing one way, like, you know, he'd been running through stuff, which I think worked out quite nicely. So here we are adding some grease to any of the machined parts, like I said, and a bit of dirt around any of the other parts where I feel like it needs it. With the dirt and the grease, I do come back over this. What I'm doing at the moment is just getting everything in where I want it, and then what I'll do later is I'll come back over the dirt layer particularly, and I'll do a smooth over, a gentle smooth over it. Obviously with the strength of the smooth brush turned all the way down because you don't want to affect the actual mesh. And then I'll just start rubbing away and digging out of it again using the paint tool on the erase mode. And then I'll, it just makes the dirt feel more realistic and not like it's just been blobbed on there, you know. So if you smooth some of it out, it feels like it's been on there a while. What I was just doing there was also adding light and setting that up for the engine so that the engine feels like he's cooking, you know, like he's ready to go. Because in the pose that I chose, he's sort of like crouched down, ready to sprint, and I wanted the engine to feel like it was like literally fired up and ready to start, like, you know, popping out some power. So yeah, that's what I was doing there, just lighting up the engine and giving it a slight paint. I'll come back to it I think in a minute, and I'll add the grease and just the dirt and any soot or any build up like that might come off of it. I'll add that all in a bit. Yeah, so here we go. I'll go for a little bit of a darker shade of like the dirt layer on some of these areas, just because again I want it to feel like soot, like he's moving so fast that he's pushing through the heat, and it's creating a soot layer around his engine area there, the turbine area in his chest. Everywhere else I just kind of layer it around the edges or anywhere that it might gather, a little bit like I did on my 2B sculpt. So we'll just let this play out because, like I said, all I'm doing is adding dirt and a grease pass to it, and then I'm going to go back over it and give it a little bit more of a believable pass in just a moment. So it was around here when I was working on the hand that I realised I wanted to go back over it and do just a better pass, like clean up some of the dirt and some of the grease that I'd put on it. So once I'd smoothed out some of the areas and then sort of like dug into it with the erase brush on the paint tool again, I was like, that just looks significantly better. So I'm going to go back over the whole model again and just clean up some of the dirt and some of the grease that I've put on this thing. So we'll let that play out. If anything changes or I do anything different, I'll jump back in. So with all that done, we're going to work on the pose. Start getting him into position. Once I'm happy with the pose, or I can't remember if I do this as just a test, but I think this is the pose I end up with. Yeah, it is. So yeah, we're going to start putting this guy into position, working on the pose, and once I'm happy with it, you know, we'll start thinking about lighting this guy and working up the render tools that we've got in there. So yeah, let's let this play out for a bit longer while I pose this guy up and get on with the rendering and the lighting. So here we're going to add some electricity off of him. I looked at some reference from the movie and I just thought he kind of looked pretty darn cool, like when he lands with the electricity coming off of him. So I went with this pose and I start adding this. This is the same electricity effect I use on most things when they have to show, you know, a build-up of energy or power. But full disclosure, I did do some work on the lighting and rendering earlier because, like I said, I did a test on the eyes. I wanted to make sure that the turbine in his chest was going to look okay. So they were all kind of sanity checks for myself that I end up just using later. So in some ways, it saved me a bit of time, but yeah, at the time they were just sanity checks, but you know, it worked out quite nicely. So let's add this electricity, then we'll go ahead now to 3-point light system and just check it over, and I'm almost done with this. I think there's only a couple of minutes left on the video, so yeah, let's let this play out and I'll jump in if anything changes or anything different happens. So here we go, adding the lighting. Happy with this. I'm really pleased with how this came out. Particularly pleased with how the metal looks with the chrome and that underneath. It's kind of giving it this sort of like purple hue to the metal, which I was super pleased with. I really love that. It feels a bit like the RoboCop armor, so super pleased. Okay, so one last thing I want to do is I want to give a shout out to the Facebook group that I'm in. It's called Nomad Sculpt Community. So if you want to follow my work, or you want to see it on Facebook, or you want to just spend a little bit more time looking at the images, the renders, go on over to Nomad Sculpt Community and check out my work there. They're a friendly group, super chill. So yeah, join up and you know, share your work. I'd love to see it. Anybody that's in there, I'd love to see your work. Amazing group. So yeah, join up to Nomad Sculpt Community if you want to see more of my images and take a closer look at that. Anyway, yeah, really happy with how this came out. Had fun sculpting this guy, so you know, if you enjoyed the content, feel free to give it a like, subscribe, share it with anyone that you think might enjoy it. You know, you can follow me on Instagram now as well, so that's in my YouTube bio. Yeah, follow me on Instagram, like and subscribe to the video. Thanks again, guys, and yeah, I'll catch you in the next one, and happy sculpting, everybody.